Right, hello everybody. I trust you can all hear me. This is Matthew Pryor of Moscow, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us on this call today. MerlinXL is being used by an increasing number of HFM users worldwide to assist them in the key areas of reporting, journals, and intercompany. Today's webinar will concentrate on the intercompany element and will be presented to you by Simon Martin, the Chief Architect of the product. During the webinar, everybody will be muted by default. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat facility and we will address them at the end if we have time. Otherwise, we will come back to you after the event to address your questions specifically. We will also provide contact details at the end for you to send additional questions or demonstration requests. So without further ado, I have pleasure in introducing you to Simon.
Thank you, Matthew. Hello, everyone. Before I start with the demonstration, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of information about MerlinXL. It's predominantly an Excel add-in, and it's very easy to install. There's no admin rights required to install the add-in. And it consists of 3 modules that we call wizards: the Report Wizard, Intercompany Wizard, and Journal Wizard. And there's one new web-based intercompany module that we'll demonstrate at the end. So if I switch over to Excel, we've installed the MerlinXL ribbon. And before I do anything, I need to, of course, connect to HFM. So first of all, I choose the web server I want to connect to, choose the HFM application, enter my username and password, the standard HFM username and password, and select OK. And once I'm connected, the 3 licensed modules are available in the ribbon. The Report Wizard, which would allow me to, for example, download a pre-built report from the report library or create my own ad hoc report from a blank worksheet. The Journal Wizard, that would allow me to download journals or journal lines and summarize them, or I can create a new journal and upload it to HFM. But today we're going to have a look at the Intercompany Wizard. And with the Intercompany Wizard, we have a number of options. We could download a pre-built intercompany report from the centrally maintained library of reports, or we can create a new one, and that's what we're going to do now. So when we create a new report, the first thing we have to do is choose what are the plug accounts that we want to include in the report. If I expand the income statement, I can see all the plug accounts that have been associated with the income statement, and each node consists of at least one plug account, or in some cases several plug accounts are being netted off together in a report called IT Services. So I'm going to choose to include all the plug accounts in the income statement. And on the right hand side, I'm going to choose the point of view that I want to run the report for. I'm just going to select the top entity, but I could select any entity or even a base entity. And I'm going to choose to run it for July. Before I do run the report, I also have to choose which translation method I want to use. I could use the translate on the fly method, or I could use the translated data method. Translate on the fly means that I extract the local currency data and exchange rate, and I translate them as the report's being assembled. This is particularly useful perhaps at the beginning of the month-end process as data is loaded, because it doesn't require the database to be consolidated or translated into the target currency. Whereas perhaps towards the end of the process, or if I use special translation rules, or for example the PVA method of translation, I might use the translated data method, which extracts the translated data from HFM. But I'm going to use the extract and translate on the fly approach, and I'm going to select OK. I first designed the Intercompany Wizard about 10 years ago when I was an HFM administrator, and I had to perform the intercompany matching process myself. And to me, it seemed like the standard HFM reports felt like they'd been designed by someone who had never actually done an intercompany matching process. So I thought I'd try and design an intercompany report that would make full use of the Excel functionality and try and get that to do as much of the work for me as I could. So here we've got the intercompany report, and just to go through what it's showing us, so if we have a look at this top line here, this is a mismatch on the intercompany dividends plug account. And it's a mismatch between entity 2501 and entity 9551. So the source entity 2501 has got a balance of minus 19 with entity 9551, but entity 9551 has got a balance of 766 with 2501, and so the net difference is the mismatch. And if we want to get further details on that mismatch, we can just right-click on the cell and we get a breakdown of the balance, and we can see what the value is in local currency. Because if we're having to investigate a mismatch balance, we actually need to get back to the local currency amount rather than the translated amount. If we look at a different balance, we can see that we get this particular balance is made up of 4 different cells. Again, we're able to see the different accounts and the local currency amounts. Now, one of the key strengths of the MerlinXL Intercompany reports is the fact that it displays all the mismatches in descending order of absolute mismatch. So we've got the largest mismatch at the top, and as we scroll all the way down, the mismatches get smaller and smaller until eventually at the bottom we see all the matched items. And we're not too concerned with those. In fact, normally most companies will set a limit below which they're not too concerned about investigating the mismatches. So we're going to do that. We're going to set ourselves a filter limit of 1,000, and we see all the items where the mismatch is less than 1,000 is now marked as OK. We don't need to concentrate too much on those. In fact, if we wanted to, we could just use the filtering and remove them from the report altogether. So let's scroll back up to the top. The other filtering that we could do, for example, is if we just wanted to concentrate on a single plug account, we can use the filtering here, and I'm just going to concentrate on dividends. And I'll just see the dividends. Or I can just work on the whole group. Now, one of the many processes you go through when you're doing an intercompany matching process is to try and identify which are genuine mismatches and which are ones that have just been poorly coded, or 3-sided mismatches. So if we have a look down here, we have a look at this particular mismatch. This is a mismatch between entity 2501, 2502, and we see it's a mismatch of minus 11759. Now, with the 3-sided mismatch, we can see that there is an equal and opposite mismatch in the row below it, and so these two effectively net off. Looking more closely at the detail, we can see that it was probably entity 2502 has coded a transaction with 9577, and that's resulted in this mismatch, when in fact they should have coded it with 2501, and if they had, this would be a 0 mismatch and it wouldn't even appear in our report. So now that we've identified that this is a 3-sided mismatch and it's not a genuine mismatch that we really need to concentrate on too much at this stage, we're just going to allocate it a reason, and in this case we'll say OK contra. So we're going to choose a reason from the drop-down list, and this is a list that your administrators can set up to suit your own purposes. We'll give it a reference number, contra 100 or 10, and then contra 10, and we'll also allocate it a reason. So we'll say in this case 2502 posted to 9577 instead of 2501. And I'll right click on the comment and I'll click save. Now that's saved the comment, but it hasn't saved it to the worksheet. It saved it to a small text database on the server. So it hasn't been loaded into HFM. But what it means is that anytime anybody runs an intercompany report for this point of view and it contains this mismatch, then they'll be able to see these comments. So if we look in the other yellow cells, we can see all the other comments that all the other users have made as they've been working through the intercompany processes themselves. So we can see the comments that they've written, the reasons that they've allocated to the mismatch, and when they posted it. So what we're trying to do with this intercompany report is to use it as a collaborative tool for sharing the information about how the process is going and what people are doing to investigate and try and eliminate the mismatches. And if we were, for example, to click on a mismatch, we get a breakdown of the conversation that has occurred on this particular mismatch, as users have been writing the comments as they've been trying to understand the reason for the mismatch or make a comment on the status or how it's going to be reviewed. In fact, a client commented that it's very similar to a Twitter feed. So we're sort of using the latest social media to try and share the information on how the intercompany mismatches are being eliminated. And if we want to look at these in more detail, we just click on it and the information is displayed in the sheet, and we can see the who commented and when. So that's unique functionality to MerlinXL and new to this version, in fact, of MerlinXL. Another thing that's new is the dashboard. This is a summary of the progress on the elimination process so far. In the left-hand table and chart, we can see that just over 3/4 of the mismatches by value have been allocated a reason. And in the right-hand column, we can see that intercompany dividends is by far the largest plug account, with balances that need to be investigated. And this is a live chart, so if we were to go back and perhaps go back to the top posting and change the reason from misposting to OK historic, if we mark it as a reason that begins with OK, then the follow-up changes to OK, so that's effectively saying we're happy with that mismatch, we don't need to do any more work on it. If we go back to the dashboard, that's now a huge chunk of that has changed to green because that's marked as OK, and we can see intercompany dividends is now no longer the largest balance that needs to be investigated. That's now gone to interco interest. Another hopefully useful report is the pivot table report. Here we have the same intercompany information in a pivot table. But pivot tables are very good for summarizing this type of data, and it allows the users to build and design their own reports. So for example, if we wanted to look at the intercompany data for just a single entity, drag up the source entity to the top here, and maybe rather than seeing the scope, I want to see the account. And if I want to search for just a single entity, I'll just type in the entity code, select it, and here I'm looking at all the intercompany data for entity 9573. So if I was the person responsible for 9573, that's a report I could use just to filter out just my data. Going back to the main sheet now, let's have a look at some of the options that are available when we run a new intercompany report. If I click on the Options tab, we can see that we can change the number format, include descriptions, but we can also choose the groupings. Now typically most intercompany matching reports are based on matching the data in the base entities. But we have some very large clients. In fact, our largest client I think has over 14,000 base entities with 8 custom dimensions. But the base entities for them are more like business units, and it's in fact the first parent that is more akin to the legal entity, and that's what they want to match on. So they select the first parent groupings, and the intercompany report is based on matching the first parent, so that eliminates an awful lot of the intercompany mismatches. We could similarly also choose a custom grouping. So a custom grouping is a collection of entities grouped together and treated as one entity for the purpose of intercompany matching. So in the intercompany matching report, you only see the net effect of that group with the rest of the organization. A few years ago, we had a client that had over 65,000 mismatch lines on their standard base entity report. And it actually meant they couldn't use Excel 2003 because that has a limit of 65,000 rows. But using the custom groupings option, they were able to cut down the number of mismatches to a more manageable couple of thousand. And you're still able to drill down to see the base entity if you need to in the report. So again, that's unique features to the MerlinXL intercompany reports, the ability to match on the first parent and custom groupings. And it's particularly useful for large organizations. So that's the intercompany options. Let's have a look now at the intercompany library. The library contains a list of reports that have been pre-built by the administrators and uploaded to the library so that users, when they run a report, don't have to worry about setting the appropriate options, and everybody is running the same report with the same set of options. So I'm going to download the income statement report, and this one contains an automation sheet. So I've downloaded a blank intercompany template, and we'll look at the automation sheet. Now the automation sheet is a report that can be added to any workbook, whether it be a report wizard report or an intercompany report. And when I click on this play button, MerlinXL will work through each of the rows in the automation sheet, updating the workbook with the point of view that's been specified in this change point of view column, generate the workbook, save it to the specified location, And if an email address has been supplied, it will email that pack out to the distribution list. So this was developed for a particular client who had a couple of issues with their intercompany reporting. They had hundreds of users who had to access the intercompany reports every month end. And with so many users trying to generate intercompany reports, it was bringing the HFM server to its knees. They also had a large number of users who needed to look at intercompany reports, but only needed to look at intercompany reports, and so they hadn't been given an HFM license because the company didn't think it worth it to buy a license just for the sake of looking at intercompany report. So with the Merlin Intercompany report and automation sheet, they were able to set up a list of all the intercompany reports that they wanted to generate, and the distribution list, and the location they wanted to save it on their network. And they were able to use this to generate the report just once, but make it available for a large number of users. So if the report's only been generated once, it significantly cuts down on the load on the server, particularly at key times. And by emailing out the spreadsheet packs, they were able to send the users who didn't have HFM access the ability to review their intercompany balances. The automation sheet proved to be such a popular success that we've actually now taken it to the next level, and we've developed what we're calling the Instant Intercompany module. So I've switched now over to HFM, and we're in the Documents workspace. And here we see a list of intercompany reports that have been created by the Instant Intercompany module. And if I double click on it, it opens up an intercompany report in the HFM workspace. And you may recognize that this looks almost identical to the intercompany report we saw in the intercompany wizard in Excel. We've got the source and match at the top, which is a 747 mismatch, and they're arranged in descending order of absolute mismatch. We've got the intercompany dividends that we can filter and just concentrate on one report if we want to. If we click on a balance, we get a breakdown of that balance where we can see the local currency amount, the exchange rate, the account that was used. And if we want to review the comments, we can just click on a comments page, comments icon, and all the comments that have occurred on that mismatch are displayed. So the way the Instant Intercompany module works is that it schedules the generation of the intercompany reports at specified times, and you can have it generating the report up to every 15 minutes, or not at all on certain days if they don't need to be. We can see here that this report was last extracted at 2:15 today, and it'll probably be extracted again at 3 o'clock. So the advantage here is that all the users can access the intercompany report within the HFM workspace, but unlike other reports within the HFM workspace, when this report is accessed, it doesn't try and generate the report, creating load on the server. So you can have hundreds of people looking at this report and going into it, and it's not causing any impact on the server because this data has been generated and stored offline. So the client that we built this for was happy to forego not having up to the second reports when they clicked on the link, for the sake of being able to just instantly access a report that would otherwise take a couple of minutes to generate, and for that report not to cause any load on the system. If we go back to the Documents tab, we can also set up a report like that to focus on just one entity. So we double click on this report, and here we're seeing the data just for a specified entity, 200T. So a user can have a link to an intercompany report for their entity and include that in their task lists. It may require a lot of links, but it means that a user doesn't have to worry about the specification. They just go in and the current period and the entity is selected. But what about users who don't have access to HFM? Well, because it's just a web page, if we close down HFM Workspace and I just double click on this link, we've got a URL here that will open up that intercompany report outside of HFM. And because the data has been extracted and stored outside of HFM, we don't need an HFM license to access this data. So the idea is that users around in the different businesses are sent this URL, and when they click on it, they can just see their intercompany report. And that means that group head office don't have to be sending out emails with spreadsheets attached of the latest intercompany reports. The users just click on their link whenever they want, and they can see the latest report, and they can see what time it was last generated. So, a couple of questions that have come in asking about the read-only on the forms. So here we can see we've got the comments and the reasons. At the moment, the web pages are read-only, so you can't write a comment on a web page. You have to have the Excel interface in order to post a comment. But if we find there's enough demand for users to be able to write reasons comments on a web page, then that's possibly functionality we'll add. So if I go back now, and just to summarize then what we've been through, we started off looking at the intercompany wizard in Excel, and hopefully you saw that the format of the report was easier to read than perhaps a standard HFM intercompany report. And there's much more ability to use the filtering and sorting within Excel. And the design of the report hopefully helps the matching process. We saw that we could read and write comments and reasons against each mismatch, and see the history of the comments that have occurred on each mismatch. We can match based on the first parent or custom groups, and we can automatically generate and distribute reports. And we've also got dashboards now and pivot reports, and that's the example of the dashboard. We then went on to the instant intercompany reports, and we saw that we can create intercompany reports in the HFM workspace and browser. And we saw that we could schedule the report generation so that reports aren't constantly causing an impact on the server, and that the instant intercompany is suitable for organizations with large numbers of users, or for users with no HFM access, or where they have particularly large intercompany reports that take quite some time to produce. So finally then, just a bit about the technical information. MerlinXL works in Excel 2007, 2010 or 2013, and in versions of HFM from 11.121 to 11.123, and we're currently working on making it compatible with 11.124. It works in Windows Vista 8.1, load balancing, Citrix environments, and the installation requires no server downtime at all. Here's a list of the MerlinXL clients at the moment, and with that completes my brief overview of the Merlin Intercompany and Instant Intercompany modules. I hope you found it interesting, and maybe some of you are now thinking that MerlinXL might just be something that will ease your intercompany matching challenges. And if you are thinking that, we will be happy to provide a more detailed demonstration. And with that, I will hand you back to Matthew.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, everybody, I know this has been a swift overview of how MerlinXL can assist in the intercompany matching process, but I trust you've managed to get some idea of how it might help you to improve your intercompany matching processes. I think Simon has answered all the questions that have come through, but if you do have any questions, if you could move Simon to the next slide, we've got some contact details that you can make a note of to get back to us. So either call myself or Simon by email directly, or if you visit the MerlinXL.com or the amosca.co.uk websites, you can log requests and queries there as well. I think that's all that we have time for. As Simon said, if you'd like to arrange a more detailed demonstration of either this intercompany matching process or indeed the reporting and journal wizards as well, then please contact us using these details. Thank you again, everybody, for signing on today, and that concludes this webinar.